Okay, so just before we start, to contextualize some stuff for our audience, we are going to be talking about characters who belong to specific groups, and we are going to use specific wording for that. We are going to refer to Miles from Compound Fracture as autistic, and we are going to refer to the characters in Looking for Smoke as native. These are the words that these characters use for themselves, the words that the authors use for these characters. This is not necessarily indicative of every single person who shares those identities. So just like this is what we're using for today, this is what these people use, but if you are interacting in public, online, or whatever, and you are interacting with someone who has these identities, always listen to the person you're speaking to about how they would like to be addressed. Cool. So with that out of the way, I'm going to say, first off, I am not a person who gets emotional about books, so I am personally offended that both of you made me feel feelings. Especially you, because I did Looking for Smoke on audio. And so I just, opened it up on my phone, started doing my meal prep, hit play, and all of a sudden I'm just feeling emotions in the first chapter. What is this first chapter? So now that I have prefaced that, can you both tell us a little bit about the books we're talking about today?
Yes. So Looking for Smoke is a young adult thriller, and it follows 4 Blackfeet teens. They live on the Blackfeet Reservation, and it's following them as they're grappling with the murder of a classmate who they each had a fraught relationship with. And because each of them were the last to see her alive, they all become suspects. And if they want to clear their names, they're going to have to trust each other, even though one of them could be the murderer. It has 4 alternating POVs. We have Mara Reset, who is struggling to find her place because she just recently moved there. We have Lauren Arno, who is stuck in the throes of angry grief since her sister went missing a few months ago. We have Brody Clark, who is fighting against the change that all this trauma is bringing. And we have Eli Firstkill, who has his walls up and he's keeping secrets, but he has his reasons. And like Austin said, it shines a light on the epidemic of missing and murdered Indigenous women, which, if you didn't know, is an issue that plagues both the US and Canada. And there's a prevalent problem where Native women are the victims of violent crime far more often than any other group. The murder rate of these women is 3 times more than that of white women, and in some locations it's 10 times the national average. So these characters are grappling with this real world problem. So on its surface, like I said, it's a thriller where teen suspects are trying to clear their names while a killer is in their midst. But at its heart, it's a story of resilience and community and fighting for your loved ones no matter the cost.
And I am so excited for it. Compound Fracture is my 3rd book. It is my first thriller. It is a young adult thriller following Miles Abernathy, a 16-year-old trans autistic teenager from Twist Creek County in West Virginia, which is based on my mammal's home county of Tucker County. My mammal's in the first row here. There are some places that are like block for block, Thomas, West Virginia, Parsons, West Virginia. It is written the way that I speak when I spend too much time around my extended family. And you start to hear a little bit of the drawl, when 5 becomes 5, and you know it's pronounced oil instead of oil. And the main character, Miles, is his great-great-grandfather was Saint Abernathy, who was a union leader, or a attempted union leader in a non-union mine that was facing a lot of danger and deaths. And after a failed mine revolt, was executed by law enforcement. And 100 years later, the Abernathy family is still dealing with the after effects of that failed mine revolt, especially because the sheriff that killed St. Abernathy is related to the sheriff that is now terrorizing Miles's family. And it is up to Miles to try and figure out something that can help save his family, save his community, and get them out from under the boot of this corrupt sheriff. There is also a cool ghost of Saint Abernathy that is helping Miles out here. There are some great members of, Miles's family who are, definitely not based on my own. Who am I kidding? I say it literally in the dedication. And some folks that are going to help him out, and it is a book about community and the fact that the American idea of the lone wolf going to fix the problem is a myth, and you cannot do anything without community and the people that you love around you. I am so excited for this book, and I can't wait to foist it on all of you. It's your problem now. It's off my plate. Get it away from me.
So I think I'm going to just jump right in with the big question. Without spoilers, both of you have characters who end up in situations where there is not a peaceful solution, and they really have to take matters into their own hands. And YA, obviously we need to put them in a situation where they're doing the thing, otherwise there's no plot. But in this specific case, the characters almost don't have a choice, right? So why did you put your characters in a position where the thing that they had to do was take direct action themselves instead of waiting for the people around them to take that action?
I think for me, when it comes to that, we have to, one of the reasons that I, write YA is that I am trying to communicate to the kids that, are going to be reading these books, because yes, adults read YA. Frankly, I don't care what they think. I didn't write it for you. I wrote it for kids. And unfortunately, one of the things that I'm seeing with society at large is that massive issues are being, unfortunately, left to the next generation. Issues that adults or older adults should have fixed but didn't out of their own. The people in power are stubborn, and the people who are not in power simply do not have the ability to do so because it's been taken from them, right? And so inevitably, everything is going to be left to kids that didn't ask for this to happen to them. They didn't want this to happen to them, and unfortunately, there's nothing that they're going to be able to do. And this book is very heavily based in the fact that I'm sorry that this was left to you. It is not fair that you have to be the one to do it, but unfortunately, that is what happened, and I'm here to hold your hand as I introduce this idea to you. I did have to pull some, because in YA, it's so unrealistic. Everyone's just kind of like, oh, like, why is a kid the one to do this? And I'm like, have you ever heard of suspension of disbelief and also a metaphor? Like so much of this is like, yeah, like maybe it's not realistic. Maybe I had to like pull one or two strings to make it so that the kid is the one that has to deal with this. But unfortunately, that is kind of what happens, and it sucks, and I'm sorry. And this book is so much about the main character being like, he spends the entire book being like, oh, I'm so adult. I'm going to be the one to fix this problem. And then it comes down to him, and he's like, oh, I am actually just a child, and this should not have been me. And I am scared, and I want my parents. And yeah, I feel like it's an apology that this is what they have to do.
Yeah, I guess going off of that, the characters in my book, they don't want to be the ones that are taking action. There's a lot of frustration in looking for Smoke. Frustration that these cases are not being solved, especially with Lauren. She is the one whose sister has been missing for months. And her and her family, they are wondering why. Why don't we know anything yet? Why haven't you found her? Why don't you have any information? And so they just have this frustration building up, and they're scared that if they don't do anything, then nothing is going to happen. If they don't take the action, then their sister, their daughter will never be found, especially as the story goes on and another body is found. They're left to deal with it. They feel this desperation, and that if law enforcement isn't finding out what's happening, they aren't finding the culprit here, then I guess we're going to have to. and they don't want to. It's just the responsibility they feel that justice will not be served if we don't shoulder this.
Yeah, and that actually leads right up to the next question I wanted to ask. Both of you have law enforcement that is perhaps not the best at their job.
Just a little bit.
A little bit. And since all of your characters are in a position where, typically they, in a ideal society would be relying on an authority and outside authorities like law enforcement to deal with the issues at hand, why did you include situations where that just wasn't an option? And not only that, but it was, in some cases, an active deterrent to them solving the problem or getting their solutions.
Let me set the scene for my answer for a minute. So the MMIW epidemic is a really complex issue, and there are a lot of possible reasons into why is this happening. And one of the reasons is a lack of resources and funding, and that goes into law enforcement. As sovereign nations, tribes have a right to govern themselves, and they have a right to have their own police force. So on the Blackfeet Reservation, there are tribal police officers, but there are also federal police officers there. So there are FBI agents, there are BIA agents. And so another reason that goes into the MMIW epidemic is that there are these conflicting jurisdictions that are all taking different cases there. And so I tried to show all of that in Looking for Smoke and have the characters doubting and questioning all these law enforcement officers who are supposed to be solving these cases and finding these girls. And what goes into it for these characters is they're wondering, are these Blackfeet police officers trying their best and they're just stretched too thin? They just don't have the resources they need? Or are they delaying the investigation on purpose? Are they hiding something? So they have all these doubts coming out. And with the federal agents, they're thinking, these guys aren't one of us. They didn't grow up here. They don't know us. They don't know the people. Are they trying their hardest, or do they care more about closing cases than actually solving them? So all this is going in, all this is affecting these characters. It's just increasing their doubt and their frustration. So it's not necessarily, oh, these cops are bad at their job. It's, are they bad at their job? Are they hiding something? Or do they just don't have the capacity to help us?
Yeah, as you were talking, I was mentally cataloging everything that's going on here, and I think there's three main reasons for it in the book. One, if the main characters could go to the cops, the book would be done here.
That's true.
Yeah, exactly. If they could go to the cops, it wouldn't be a plot. Two, I wanted to cut the main character off from the highest level of authority that would be able to help them in this situation. And in that area, that would be the cops. However, the word of God is the game warden. Unfortunately, there is no game warden in this, so that would have been really funny. But the highest authority that actually has any power in the lives of people in this area are going to be the cops, because state government is really far away, federal government is even further, local government is just some old guys in a building down the street what are they doing, right? Passing tax law that nobody can understand? Yeah, no, who cares? So cops are going to be the most powerful people in the area. And two, West Virginia and Appalachia in general is very hesitant of authority, especially federal or state authority. That running joke about NASCAR being invented because moonshiners were trying to outdrive the cops. I'm like pretty sure that's legit, but don't take my word for it. So there is like this distrust of authority and people who have power over you, specifically law enforcement, who law enforcement has the very unique position of being the only group of people who are allowed to enact violence against you. So obviously the main character has some issues with that, especially because the people that hurt him are being protected by the sheriff. They have nowhere to go to. The sheriff is like, hey, you know, if you talk about who did this, there's going to be consequences. So he is cornered by the people that have the most power in this area, which means that he is going to have to do everything himself, especially because the people around him are understandably terrified of that violence that is allowed in certain circumstances. And there is a point at the end of the book where the main character is like, I don't understand like why we are deemed violent for trying to defend ourselves. Like, we are trying to equalize power in this community, and we are being reacted with violence. And when we are violent back, we are defending ourselves. So like the main character can conceptualize violence and self-defense, and he realizes, is taking power, if you're trying to take power from someone that has too much power and they react with violence, do they see that as self-defense? Like, is their power part of their personhood? Is that something that we can help people uncouple, or is this something we're always going to have to deal with, right? Most people with power never take kindly to that power being taken away, even if they have too much. And it's like, do they see them defending their power as defending their life? And so putting law enforcement in that capacity, because, you know, they're the ones with the gun. How do we deal with that, especially as kids? Because the main character is 16 and he does not know what's going on. He's having a really hard time. So like there were a lot of reasons why I think that like law enforcement was going to be the biggest block to this book. And it's just because it's West Virginia. That's just what happens.
Yeah, and when you were saying at the beginning, it reminded me of something in my book as well. We both have small towns. Mm-hmm. It's rural. So another thing that comes into play with these characters is these tribal officers there, they know everybody. You know, in a small town, you wonder if this officer has to arrest someone who is their cousin or their best buddy from high school or their basketball coach, or, you know, like, are they treating them as they would treat everyone else, or are people getting favors? Are they letting things slide? So that's another thing that they're dealing with some of the officers.
Yeah, and I think that one of, or two of the things that really play into making that power dynamic very, very messy is in both of your books, the characters are from poorer areas and they have a lot less financial capital to be working with. And there's also a lot of community struggles with drugs. And that just puts the law enforcement kind of also at odds, like on a different axis as well. Could you talk a little bit about why those factors kind of entered your book and how you think they really affected that power dynamic?
I think one of the things that I wanted to do with this book in particular is just like represent an area as it is. And so one of the main characters, Cooper, his dad is unfortunately reliant on opioids to function after being in a massive car accident that completely obliterated him. The main character's father was also in that position, but his wife works in some sort of medical field and was able to help wean him off, even though it took a long time and he took it very badly. Unfortunately, Cooper's father has not had that same access and I wanted to make sure that the book represented that character as kindly and empathetically as possible. Because the main character is like, look, I know it's not his fault. There are no resources to help him, you know, with this situation. He is doing the best that he can to take care of his job and his son, even if it's not what his son always needs. And just sort of like looking at this man with like understanding and respect. He is never once looked down on for being dependent. Like, he is taken care of by the people in his life. and it's just unfortunately a situation that he finds himself in. Especially because West Virginia has like some of the highest like opioid prescriptions like in like the country. I think it's like 4 opioid prescriptions per person in certain areas, if you just like do the math. And that's just how it is, unfortunately. And some people have like such nasty reactions to people who are dependent on opioids. Like you hear some law enforcement being like, oh, don't give them Narcan, they're not worth it. Like they don't deserve it. And I'm just like, that's a human being. Can you stop being like that? What is wrong with you? So I wanted to like take some time in the book to kind of like carve out, this is really difficult. This is a situation that really sucks. But it is the situation, and those people obviously deserve kindness. Like they're just going through something that's hard. So I wanted to carve out like a space in the book to like kind of like talk about that, even if it's not like the main focus of it.
Yeah, similarly, I was trying to write a setting that is really authentic, and unfortunately, there is a big drug problem on the reservation, and I mean, frankly, everywhere. But the Blackfeet Nation actually declared a state of emergency a few years ago because there were so many overdoses. I think in a week span, there were 4 fentanyl deaths and 12 overdoses, and it's a small town, and so just in 1 week. So I wanted to show that it's a real problem and it's really affecting these kids that I'm writing about. So I brought in addiction and how it's affecting their families in different ways and how the kids are dealing with it, showing a different range of emotion and kids in different states of dealing with it, and showing that, you know, some understand like it's not their parents' fault, like they're not trying to do this, but others are in a state of like they hate the parent, like, you know, there's a full range, and I tried to show all of that. And it also does play into the law enforcement issues because sometimes the law enforcement officers will assume that when someone goes missing that it must be drug related, and in a lot of cases it is, but not always. And so the characters in Looking for Smoke are dealing with this, trying to convince the officers, no, my child was not addicted to drugs. This is not because of drugs. And they don't always believe them.
And that sort of sense of community, not necessarily focused on those issues, but kind of united by those issues, is really important because your characters really rely on the community that they are in to drive them while they are confronting the various issues in their book. And in both cases, you're really dealing with a very, I don't want to call it an insular community or like a closed community, but a community that doesn't necessarily take kindly to outsiders. Why? Explain.
Well, when you grow up with a small group of people, you know them so well. You know the good things about them, you know the bad things about them. So when someone new comes in, it's like this mystery that you're not used to. And I tried to show that with my character, Mara. She is Blackfeet, but she's just moved into town. She didn't grow up on the reservation, and she's struggling to fit in. And the characters, they don't welcome her, but she also, I think a lot of what it comes down to is that she's doubting herself, and they see that, and they kind of twist it into she doesn't want to be here, or she thinks she's better than us, but she's nervous herself and doubting, do I fit in here? Do I belong here? Am I one of you? But I played with how it can come across differently to the people on the outside, and they just are thinking that she's stuck up, and it causes a lot of problems there. But I wanted to create a journey with her where she finds it in herself that she's enough, but she also finds it through the community that she's enough. And I think that's a question a lot of us have that we can relate to, where we ask ourselves, am I enough? Do I belong here? Do I fit in here? I know I feel that, especially as I was writing this book. I had those questions like, am I talented enough? Am I Blackfeet enough? Am I the right person to tell this story? And like Mara does in the book, I turned to my community, I turned to my dad, and I laid all these doubts out for him. And he said something to me that I will always remember. He said, "You're Blackfeet, my girl. Nobody can take that from you." And that was so powerful to me. So I wrote that into this book because it resonated so much with me. I wrote that into a scene with Mara because I think everyone deserves to hear that. You are enough, you do belong, and nobody can take that from you.
This is just...
Sorry.
There is a lot that I wanted to do with community in here, and a lot of it, has to do with what I said previously about the idea of the lone wolf being a myth. America loves the idea of a lone wolf, but it doesn't work like that. When people try to go lone wolf in this book, they die, right? That's not how it works. And there was a lot that I want to do in community with this book, and there's a positive side to like a really tight-knit community and kind of like a negative side to a really tight-knit community. The negative side of it is that there is so much fear surrounding the main character's family, because the main character's family is the focus of the hatred of the powerful people in this county. So people know that if they spend too much time around the Abernathys, if they get too involved, that bad things might happen to them. It happens several times over the course of the book. People die because they get too close to the main character's family. They get in between them and the sheriff, and they are properly disposed of, simply because they are in the way, right? And the main character has to deal with the fact that it can be difficult to become friends with people, to be close to people, when simply interacting with them is putting them in danger. So how do you find community in that situation where people are scared to get close to you? There are some instances in the book where people are like, I can't do this, I'm backing away, I'm getting out of the situation, I'm sorry this is happening to you, but I don't want to die. The other thing is that there are a lot of people in this book that all have very different political aims, very different political belief systems. West Virginia is a hard, deep red state. There are lots of people who are very conservative, but the main character is a socialist. There are lots of people around him that are more left-wing. And essentially what happens in the book is both sides of them, they're realizing that on either side of this community, we are trying to make things better for our families and our people. We are just going about it different ways. So throughout the book, you see people who are on the more conservative end of the spectrum, sort of butting heads with people on the further left, but at the end of the book, they're still coming together and being like, okay, what happened to that sheriff? I'm glad he's gone. Yeah, don't worry about it. No, state police, we're not going to tell you where he is. That sort of thing, where it's coming together and we're going to protect our community, even if the ways that we're doing it are kind of different. We're still trying to make sure that our family has food on the table, that we have a roof over their heads. We're going to come together and figure this out. Obviously, they don't all agree on how, but when the matter is survival, you can't be picky.
And that kind of also really, you see that in how your books kind of wrap up with closure. There were times when I was reading these books that I was like, am I gonna get an ending that doesn't make me want to throw this book when I'm done? And we got there. I wasn't sure the entire time. And part of why I wasn't sure is because you're both writing about communities that in real life often don't get closure. And obviously we want closure in a book. We want to close the book and be like, yes, that was good. I know what happened. I feel confident that these characters are probably gonna do okay. So aside from that though, why was it important for you to give that to your characters, especially in the context of them being from communities that don't necessarily get that?
I know that a big thing for me is that whether or not my characters get a nice, neat ending depends entirely on the audience that I'm writing for. If I'm writing for adults, I don't care what you think about the ending. If it, like, genuinely, it could be an open ending, everything is bad, everything is just like, oh God, are the characters okay? Yes, it's fine, you know, it's art, I'm having fun. But, like, when I am specifically writing YA, like, I talked about this in a video that I made, but I know that I'm writing for a very vulnerable population. This in particular, you know, like I'm writing for a poor, trans, queer, autistic teenager. And very often those kids have no role models. Like very often I talk to kids where they're like, you are the first person I've met that like is like me and is an adult. And I'm like, that's really upsetting. And that's why I write these books, because they don't get to see that very often, especially not as adults. They don't get to see themselves be grown up. It's not something they have access to. So when I'm writing a book like this, I'm very, very aware that these kids have like nothing, right? And so it is my job at the end of the book to be like, yes, absolutely, these characters are going to grow up and so are you, right? Because it feels so isolating, because like even before I knew, so like I didn't figure any of this out until college, so I was just white knuckling it through high school. My grades were perfect. I had a 99 in every course, but oh, I had no friends. Like one, you, and I married you, so you don't count. My wife's in the first row. And it was just, even before I knew what was going on with me, I still felt super isolated, because like all of the neurotypical women role models just weren't clicking for me, and I didn't know why. So even if I'm getting to those kids like before they figure out what's going on, hopefully they read this and like get an inkling of something, right? So it's because I care about my kids.
Yeah, again, I feel like we have so many similar takes on this. So in writing Looking for Smoke, I had a couple different goals. My biggest goal is that I hope my readers come away feeling something, that they will sit with these characters and feel that pain they're in. They feel the betrayal. They feel like this desperation. And then in turn, they feel that for the MMIW epidemic. So I really wanted to shine a light on the issue and help raise awareness and help people to get a better understanding of the issue and come away wanting to help. But also, I wrote this book for Native kids, and I want them to see themselves in this book, to see themselves in the characters and see them fighting, and then come away with hope, like the characters do, to feel that, yeah, we don't always have closure, and these cases aren't always solved, but we find like a solidarity with community, and we can find closure in community. And it was important for me, for the Native kids, to see that and to see these characters succeeding in their own ways despite everything, and to just feel that hope after.
Which is, you know, you're not necessarily writing in genres that are hopeful. That is not necessarily the end goal here. What made you choose the genre? Because it's not, you know, you're saying like amazing things about what you want, you know, your readers to get out of it, and that's part of why I'm a librarian. I want to, you know, have that same relationship with my kids and, you know, help them get there where they need to be. But I would not necessarily have gone, oh yes, I will pick up a thriller. That is what I will get.
Well, I think I didn't have the idea and then say it'll be a thriller. It was, I write thrillers, and ooh, I have this idea. I love reading thrillers, and so I love writing them. I think it's hard for me to focus on books sometimes. I have a lot going on. I have 2 young kids. I'm easily distractible. So I need a book that grabs you, and thrillers really do that for me. So that's just sort of my vibe. So I had to find a way to write this book as a thriller while keeping it respectful and sensitive to a real issue, which is kind of nerve-wracking to do. It's a lot of pressure, and I was worried I wouldn't be able to do it justice, but I think I was able to find this fine line to walk on through the characters and to bring in as much authentic emotion as I could. Because while the cases in this book are fictional, the emotions behind them are real. Like, real communities are feeling this. And yeah, I think if you bring in that emotion and have readers be able to sit in those feelings with the characters, then you can work it in any genre.
Yeah. I'm a horror novelist by trade, so this is actually a step down in the bleakness and violence.
Yeah, there was really only one scene that I was like, oh yes, this is in fact an Andrew Joseph White book. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, my first two books are way grosser. But like my books have a tendency to be like very aggressive, and I don't think you can get away with gutting a human being, just a normal contemporary, right? You really can't do that. Once you start treating, once you start field dressing people, you kind of change genres just by necessity. And it's kind of one of, like, horror and thrillers and that sort of thing are always my go-to for writing these kinds of books, because the whole point of my books is, like, life, this situation sucks. It is so bad. However, you are going to make it out the other side alive. You may not be okay, you may not be in one piece, you might be missing some bits, or you're gonna be traumatized for the rest of your life, but you're going to make it, like, you're going to survive, right? Like, you're going to make it to adulthood. So the more that I put the characters throughout the course of the book makes the closure at the end better, because they have fought so unbelievably hard to get there, which is part of why my books are so brutal, where it's like, I know this is what it feels like. Like, all of my work is super exaggerated versions of feelings that kids deal with IRL. Or unfortunately, there are some things that I've written about where, yeah, there's definitely a kid who that has gone through that, and that sucks, and that is a nightmare, and I hope, like, you're not gonna come out the other side of that okay. But you will be alive, and you have the rest of your life to get better and to heal and to meet new people and to be loved. You just gotta make it. That's kind of the whole point.
So we're kind of getting to the time where I will release the audience on you.
Ah, yes.
So that my last question is, these books are a lot. They're very good. If you haven't read them, read them. But they're a lot. There's a lot going on. And if there is one thing that you want every person who is going to pick up these books to know going in, what would that thing be?
The dog survives. The dog on the cover survives. I wouldn't do that to you. I'm not a monster. Because I know we all read those books in, like, middle school with the dog on the cover and the dog dies. This isn't Old Yeller. What's the other one? Yeah, where the red fern grows. This isn't that. The dog is okay. I can't promise anything about the people, but the dog's fine.
Oh, that's a very important disclaimer.
Yeah, I have people asking me on TikTok, is the dog okay? I'm like, yes, I'm not a monster. Like, I'm terrible, but I'm not that bad.
People, it's fine. Dogs, don't go there. I don't have an important disclaimer like that. That's a good question. I guess I would just tell people to go in trying to feel it, trying to relate to the characters and meet them where they're at, and just, I guess, have an open heart about it, because that's my goal, to have people feel it, and it sounds like you did.
That I did.
So check right there.
All right, so our audience, I am sure you have many, many questions. Microphone. If you have a question, please come down. Please do keep it to questions, not comments. And I think we'll hop between microphones if we can get lines on both sides.
While we're lining up, I have a running joke with when I do school events. where, you know, kids are always really excited, but I'm always just kind of like, look, I just want to make it clear, I am not your parent, teacher, guidance counselor, or therapist. I am some guy who wrote a book you like. I can talk about my own experience. I cannot help you with yours.
What he said, for me too.
I write it on my palm every time I do a school thing.
You're a possum and a person too.
Exactly. I'm just an opossum. Like, it's fine.
All right, let's start over here.
Hi. So, both of your books have characters who are unwillingly implicated in the violence of the plot. And I was wondering if you could get a little bit more into why that was so important to include.
There is, if you've ever seen the UK edition of my book, there is a quote on the front where it's sort of along the lines of, monsters don't get pity, they don't deserve it, right? And so in this situation of compound fracture, the main character being implicated in the violence, being implicated in the cyclical violence, means that he no longer has the ability to just step back and be like, nope, I'm not a part of it, I'm just going to leave. The fact that he inadvertently, or maybe accidentally, does something that causes harm to another person means that he can't get out of it anymore. Like, he did it. He's the one that started it now. Essentially, the antagonist can look at it and be like, oh, so when all of this happens, it was your fault. And there's no way for him to get out of it there. One, it's a really good plot hook, and two, the main character hates it, so it's awesome.
Yeah, that's a really good way of describing it. They're in it. Like, they can't just say, well, it's not my problem.
Yeah.
And for me, I just really wanted to write a book where there are multiple points of view and these characters are all doubting each other and they all have secrets. I think that really ups the tension when you know they're keeping secrets from each other. And I love books that do that, so I wanted to write one that does that. And I had a lot of fun figuring out how to put myself in these characters' shoes and write their secrets and write their lies, but from a place where I understand why they're lying. Like, I see their truth, and it's different. Everyone's truths are different, and that's a lot of fun to write from. So that's what I wanted to do.
All right, let's hop over here.
Hi, sorry, I'm nervous. I've read both of your books, Andrew, and they're amazing. But the second one I thought was really cool, and this one is very interesting to me because of how much like history is like inspired by it. And like I had no idea what like the Virginia Coal Wars thing was until I heard about it, and I was like, "Ooh, what's this?" But could you talk about like our like what gave you like the idea to like do that specifically? Like history-wise?
Yeah, the history ones. So one, it's honestly really funny because one, I'm really bad at research. So for The Spirit Bears Its Teeth specifically, my running joke was that like, the only thing I know about the Victorian era is my wife talking about Bridgerton at me. And then my wife was like, that's Regency. And which shows what I know. But I pull from history very specifically because I feel like it is an understandable starting point or exaggeration of issues that currently exist. So the Victorian era was very, very good for working with misogyny, where we can expand upon it in this era, but it still exists in some of those forms today, so we can just use a form that you are more comfortable with to talk about these, and I'm going to let you apply it to the modern day like this. Compound fracture was a little different because I specifically wanted to talk about the West Virginia Coal Wars. So if anyone has a copy of Compound Fracture, if you open it up, there are photos from the actual West Virginia Coal Wars on the end papers. Like very few people actually know about the West Virginia Coal Wars. It was one of the first times that bombs were used, like the Battle of Blair Mountain was one of the first times that bombs were used on American citizens, and it was by the government. They used repurposed World War I munitions and dropped them on the strikers. And then around that time, I think it was also Tulsa, and then eventually World War II. So I really, really wanted to talk about something that not a lot of people know about is in West Virginia, so that's like my family, and also because it was a very socialist-led like conflict. And people think about West Virginia as being like super backwards and right wing, and I'm like, no, 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 look at our history. So.
I didn't know about them. I'm excited to read it and then go down the rabbit hole.
Oh, the
of
Wikipedia is
researching.
so interesting. Oh my gosh, it's so good.
Hi. So I feel like marginalized communities often connect with ideas of monstrosity and like horror and stuff like that. I was wondering if for either of y'all there are like seminal works that you saw that made you want to work in these genres, like movies or things that you read that inspired you to create this kind of work.
I was mainly inspired by One of Us is Lying. I'm sure a lot of you have read that book. Just having the 4 characters all keeping their secrets, it sucked me in so much. And that's when I was like, I need to do this. I need to write 4. And while I was writing 4, I was like, I'm never doing this again. This is hard, but it was fun. So then I have done it again.
I love that. When you said that this was 4, I was like, oh my God. Like, because I know that's difficult. I have trouble nailing one voice.
Yeah.
So trying to get 4, I have so much respect. Oh my gosh, I know it's difficult. Horror for me, so I've always, so hilariously, I'm a huge wimp, actually. I have such a hard time with horror movies. I'm really, really bad at them. I like watch them through my fingers. I really want to watch Alien, won't be able to sit through it. I know it's just not happening. But video games were huge for me when I was a teenager, and I think the thing that really got me into horror specifically was Dead Space. My parents wouldn't let me get a copy of Dead Space for the Xbox, so I watched a playthrough on my little iPod Touch after school when I was 12, and let me tell you, it crossed some wires at a formative age. So everything that I do is like based on that like sense of dread and monstrosity, and a lot of it has to do with the whole, like being a marginalized thing, where, my running joke is that like not knowing that I was trans disconnected me from myself, and not knowing that I was autistic disconnected me from other people, and you don't have anything after that. And monsters were the first place that I really saw that reflected. But when you're like a little kid, monsters are like wolves. So I was like really into wolves when I was a kid, and then dragons, and then I learned about like xenomorphs and necromorphs. I'm like, oh, so that's my personality now.
The iTouch is bringing back a lot of memories.
Yeah, the little guy. It still had the button.
Yeah.
It still actually had a headphone jack.
Good times.
I'm so mad about that.
So, I will be honest, I have not read either of your books. I work in healthcare, so it doesn't go well as far as reading unless you're up until 4 a.m. Over the last few weeks, I have researched both of you and how, yes, I've been waiting for this day. So I know both of you, when you write your books, you base it off of other people as well to help form the characters. But have you ever thought about doing something more nonfiction of like this day, if that makes sense?
I've thought about doing nonfiction once or twice, but my problem is I like to embellish and lie too much. Because like one of the things I joke about is like being a fiction writer is being paid to get really, really good at lying, and convincing you that something happened when it didn't. And I know that if I was presented with a story, my whole thing would be like, but what if this happened? And I would want to write that instead, because I'm nosy and have trouble focusing. So I would try to write this other thing, and suddenly that's fiction now, because that's what happens when you lie in nonfiction. It becomes fiction. So usually when I'm taking inspiration from like IRL, I will just like steal all of the cool stuff like a grubby little goblin, and then especially because like writing a book, you really have to suspend disbelief. It's so hard to write a really good nonfiction novel. So what I'll do is I'll just take the stuff that doesn't work for a narrative, just kind of throw it away. It's like, I don't need that. So yeah, I have a tendency to just embellish too much, but there is so much good stuff that you can use respectfully in fiction from real life, which is, I feel like we did both of us did that. So I like to steal. I'm a little thief.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of pressure I would feel if I tried to write nonfiction, because you want to get it exactly right, and I don't see myself doing that yet, but like he said, I did put in a lot of real things into this book. Like I even tried to honor my family members by like using their names in here, their Indian names, and Looking for Smoke is actually the name of my 5th great grandfather. So I still tried to bring in some real people in certain ways, and I think that's as far as I will go.
Yeah. Imagine if you're writing about someone who's still alive and you get something wrong, I die.
Too much.
I have a process question about writing from 4 different voices. Did you like write the story and then pick this moment I want to tell it from this perspective, or did you write each character's whole story and pick out the parts that worked the best? How do you
That's a great question.
I know this.
Well, something about me is I have to write in order. Some people like jump around. They write a scene they're excited about, or I can't do that. I have to start at the beginning and I have to write it. So I would just feel where the story was and then just choose who it would be from next. And there were a couple times where I would start from someone and I would be like, yeah, this doesn't feel right. I would get a little bit of writer's block, and it was because I was in the wrong person or the right people weren't there. So it's just, you had to feel it out as you write and see where you're at in the story and who will have the most interesting perspective at that moment. Or if someone is clearly, they're keeping a secret in this moment, then you jump to the person who maybe that secret is hurting the worst. It's just, yeah, I just play around with it as I go. And I'm also a pantser. So that also, I just feel it out as I go on everything, basically.
I love that it comes down to who would have the worst time being in this situation. Yes. I respect that so much.
Bring the pain.
Your books both seem to be dealing with some very intense issues that could very easily have gone into what you might call more of a general fiction. What was it about the YA approach that attracted you as opposed to, I mean, these are very serious issues that, you know, you could write almost anything about. What specifically drew you to YA to address these issues?
I actually get this question a lot because with my YA, I get a lot of people being like, why isn't this adult? And my running joke is, oh, when it's adult, you'll know. Don't worry. But I specifically write these books for 16-year-old me because when I was 16, I was reading Hog by Samuel R. Delany. I was reading Exquisite Corpse by Poppy Z. Bright. Yeah, like Wasp Factory, Cows by Matthew Stokoe. I found a list of the 100 most disturbing novels in the English language, and I was going through it one by one, right? And I was in high school, and I loved how these books made me feel. I was disgusted, right? I remember I found the short story Guts by Chuck Palahniuk in high school, and I got halfway through, had to stop, picked it up a week later, read it all the way through, gave it to my father. And I remember you walking into my room just being like, why? And that was the last time I was ever so disgusted with something I had to put it down. And I'm still kind of chasing that. I'm trying to find it, haven't found anything yet. But I remembered reading those things, and I loved the way that they made me feel. I loved the sensation of pushing boundaries, about like dealing with topics that were kind of off limits to society as a whole. But I kind of wished that they were also more relevant to me as a teenager or had something to say to me at that age. So I went, okay, so when I'm writing for teenagers, what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce that taboo, that boundary pushing, that horrible feeling in the pit of your stomach, but I'm specifically going to be tackling things about growing up and being a teen. And also like tackling them in a way that I'm trying to actually say something, right? Instead of just going like, what's the grossest thing I can do here? I'm like, what's the grossest thing I can do here and have it mean something, right? So I very specifically like wanted to go into it and being like, I'm writing this for kids while still bringing up that sensation of, should I be reading this? Do I have to close the book and walk away? Like letting myself have that feeling while still writing it for kids, and hopefully they can get something out of it.
That is very much a talent, to make it mean something. Impressive. For me,
Thank you to my editor.
yes. always. I love young adult. I think the themes of like finding yourself, finding your strengths, figuring out where you fit in, what you want to do with your life, I still relate to those, and I think it's just like a hopeful time, but also the issues, they matter to teens as well. And so I just wanted to write a young adult book because it's what I love, selfishly, I guess.
All right, we have time for one more super quick question.
How would you say your character's identity and their respective intersections of identity influence the way they experience community throughout the narrative?
Oh my gosh. Do you want to answer that? Or what do we do here?
I can start. Well, I specifically think of my character Mara first because, like I said earlier, she joins this community being the new girl, and she is doubting herself, and that affects how she's interacting with her community. If she doesn't feel she fits there, then she doesn't try so hard to fit there. But I really wanted to show that it was more of coming from herself. It was like an internal barrier. And when you get through that and you see that you can be uplifted by your community, you find the belonging there, and your identity just solidifies even more when you feel it in yourself and you feel the people around you supporting you in that, and like you feel held by them.
Yeah. One of the things that I wanted to talk about in Compound Fracture is, the area is a very insulated community, but it's not that Miles is an outsider because he came from the outside. He is somehow managing to be an outsider even though he grew up there his whole life. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that, there's not a lot of queer people in this area, and there is a very, very limited sense of what autistic people are like or what's going on there, because the main character doesn't even know until 3/4 of the way through the book. So everyone, he grew up with these people, but he is still just the weird one to everyone else, on top of the fact that he's an Abernathy, so he can't interact with anyone anyway. So I really wanted to sort of tackle, being marginalized in a community that you were raised in, because I feel like there's very interesting conversations in the difference between being marginalized due to something that was recognizable at birth and being marginalized because of something that was discovered later. I feel like there are very interesting conversations to be had about the similarities and differences between those two things. So going into this, I wanted to see what this insular community would be like, having to deal with someone who suddenly became very different, even though they've known this person the whole time. I do think the community kind of came first, though, because I already had it. They were based on the people that were already in my life and the areas that I already knew. So I'm just kind of I have this. What kind of person can I create to get this point across in the best way?